Now, what makes a great web design? All websites have a goal. That could be to convert users over to a subscription service, purchase a product, or just provide helpful information to the user. A great website is one that converts its viewers well. This can be through the use of consistent branding, authenticity, and well-written copy, effective product photos, and more. So what's your role as a graphic designer in the world of web design? Well, if you can develop and code a website, you're a rare breed, and you will be paid handsomely. But with website design becoming more and more complex and coding becoming more specialized, it might not be a bad thing to have our different specialties. I see web design being the responsibility of three main contributors. First of all, there's the developer. He will take the final design and turn it into a coded, real, workable stuff. He requires knowledge of front-end and back-end coding languages, server-side languages, and more. A highly specialized individual. He focuses in on the technical side of things. How does it work? And newly added to the group in the last 10 years is the UX designer, or user experience designer. A lot of graphic designers start to learn this field of design, and it's growing in popularity. The UX designer will do a lot of the user testing and user research to find out the order of how the user needs to move through the website. This means they will map out a user journey, so you know how many main menu options there needs to be for the user, and how many steps in each process to get the user to their end goal. This requires a ton of research and something called wireframing. Wireframing is a way for a UX designer to map out the flow of a website and block out areas where a button may need to go, a photo, or where options may lie for the user. This rarely includes final graphics and can sometimes just be grayed out boxes. So what about the cool visuals, the branding, the colors? This is where the graphic designer or UI, user interface designer, can come in and really flesh out the visual details. Once you have the basic outline, sitemap, framework, it's your job to create icons, style guides, some basic layout ideas, so the developer can code this and make it a real polished reality. So now that we know our role, how do I create an effective website design or mobile app design? And there's some basic ideas to keep in mind. Using contrast. And here we are talking about contrast yet again. Contrast is a great way to lead the user on a journey toward their desired destination. This could be toward a shopping cart. We can use red, which would be a higher contrast color here among the sea of white, to have the user easily find the shopping cart, making their experience easier. Use size to your advantage. What do you think converts better in this e-commerce store layout? A product feature that has a small photo or one that has a larger photo? The larger photo naturally converts better because it gives the viewer a better idea of the product that they're getting ready to click onto. And what do you think works better? 12 items listed on one screen, or a selected 3 curated items? The items have a larger feature tend to do better. People get overwhelmed with too many options. When you refine those options for the viewer, it tends to reduce this emotional tension, making it easier to select an option overall. This is why people enjoy curated content like news. There's hundreds of news articles we can read at any given time, but using size to highlight the most important ones does wonder for our soul and our minds, and our conversion and click-through rates. Clean and simple is the name of the game. Let's talk a little bit about clean design and web and mobile design. What do you think works better? The layout on the left or the layout on the right? Simplifying the design can help the user feel less overwhelmed, just like it did when we gave them more selected options based on size. Have a sense of hierarchy. Do not feel you have to cram everything into one area. There'll be certain items that will be more important than others. For example, certain products sell better and will be a top priority. Hierarchy can be applied to mobile and web design in several ways. You have type hierarchy, which can be defined by establishing a font size and weight for your main largest headline type, and then you slowly working your way down to smaller headlines. This usually is indicated by the term H1 for the largest, and going down to H2, H3, H4, and so on for smaller headline sizes. Then you have your main body copy or your paragraph size type, which is usually a simple font, a normal weight, and a little bit smaller compared to the headline sizes. Your job as a designer is to establish and set this sense of hierarchy in the design. Take this example. The example on the right does not really use type hierarchy. Items are similar sizes and they have almost zero contrast. But the example on the left establishes a strong type hierarchy system, which uses varying styles for certain types of information, headlines, and sublines, giving the design an orderly feeling. We could do the same thing with print design, and it translates well to the web. Font choices are everything. Not just important in web design, but all design projects, font choices are everything. Larger font sizes can have huge impact on landing pages to drive sales or to drive an action or emotional response. Fonts that are too small in size can impact readability and effectiveness. The best practice for choosing fonts for your digital project is to keep it as simple and orderly as possible. You want to make sure your font choices check all of the boxes at all times. Number 1, it's readable at the final size. A font used on a desktop website can look nice and big and readable, but when it shrinks down to the mobile version of the website, is it still readable, and does it retain the same impact? Number 2, you're not using too many different fonts. Try to avoid using more than 3 fonts on one web page or digital graphic, unless there's a specific creative design reason to do so. Avoid using similar font types, like using Helvetica close to Arial. They're both very similar in appearance, and they're both sans serif typefaces, confusing the viewer of which one is which. Lastly, make sure it's easy to read by keeping the line length reasonable. Which column of information is easier for you to read? The version on the left or the version on the right? The right is most likely easier to read because the total length or line length of the type is easier for our eyes to read. The same applies to print projects. You want to be able to keep your line length no longer than 60 characters per line. You can use columns and photos to help make this more possible for you. Do not be afraid of being expressive with your typography in digital design. We use the default typefaces like Helvetica, Verdana, and Arial because they were web safe, and everyone's devices had these pre-installed. Nowadays, we can store fonts on the cloud. For example, Google Fonts keeps all of their fonts on the cloud, so you can load a bigger variety of fonts now, and people don't have to have them installed on their computers to see them in their browsers. This has opened up a world of expressive, creative typography on the web. Now we no longer have to use pictures to show expressive typefaces or typography. We can make it live type, meaning people can select it, copy it, interact with it, and sometimes you can even make it move. As designers, we could be just as creative as we are with print projects with digital projects. Make sure to experiment with interesting typography for your headlines. Sans serif typefaces tend to rule the day of the past, but now you're seeing more and more detailed serif typefaces and even script typefaces live on digital interfaces. The only warning here is to make sure you do not overuse expressive and detailed typography too often in your digital design. They can be great attention-grabbing headlines, but avoid using too many custom unique fonts for smaller areas of text or copy and paragraphs. It's best to keep those really expressive, beautiful typefaces at maximum readability, making them larger and using them for headlines. Study popular and emerging new ways of displaying information. There are so many emerging ways to display a menu. What was popular before was the hamburger menu. In the mobile app or website design, it's a simple icon which expanded out a sliding menu. This was nice and provided the user with easy access to a menu without taking up too much space on the top of an app screen. But with phones getting much larger, the user now has to take their finger and go all the way up to the top of their phone to access this hamburger menu. Now, shelf menus at the bottom tend to be preferred by users. These small evolutions in UI or user interface design of a mobile app, for instance, are little things you need to be aware of if you are interested in perfecting digital design. We need to start thinking about mobile first. Not long ago, we thought about the desktop version of a website, and then we figured out how it would best adapt to a smaller mobile screen. Well, times have changed, and now we need to switch that mentality around. A good standard way to design now is to design at smaller sizes first and then work your way up to larger sizes. So for example, starting off with a mobile version of a website, and then you need to figure out how it will expand when it's on a browser on a tablet. And then finally, you want to see how it looks on a larger desktop screen. The same applies to email newsletters. How you view an email on your iPhone email application, for example, looks a lot different than how you view that email on your desktop. The images are much smaller than you expect when viewed on your phone, and it's a best practice to keep that in mind when creating any digital design image. And this leads into responsive design. What is responsive design? It's simply how a website responds when it's shown at different browser sizes. Sometimes elements collapse to make it easier to see on a mobile device. Sometimes elements are not shown on a mobile device when it's converted to a smaller size, like a photo, for example. These choices are all important for you to understand when designing for both larger and smaller sizes, and something you and your developer can sort out as a team.